Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure being able to participate in this journey and meet everyone that we have invited to speak today. We wanted to start off by first acknowledging that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. We are welcomed here today by UBC, a leading organization on the West Coast. And it is such an amazing partnership to have with them. We have students that are in the crowd today. What the message that we are trying to deliver to everyone is such an important message that ultimately the various people within the industry did not get the kinds of training that we think is so incredibly important in order to lead us forward in the net zero transition. I will talk to you a little bit about how I became involved in this association and also my journey throughout the industry and towards where we are today when it comes to net zero and looking at how we're going to solve something that seems like an insurmountable challenge. So my background is I started in architecture. I then worked my way over to working for general contractors. I then worked for developers. I moved to the owner-operator side and ultimately ended up getting retained into a large company working on their net zero strategy. I was the North America lead for sustainable transportation for all of the, and I worked with all of the different business lines within Amazon.com and AWS. My journey from architecture to construction and then real estate development gave me the ability to look at the different aspects to the problem of how we are going to design something, construct it, conceive of it. And then I also was focused on the financing behind it as well and went back and did a master's in real estate finance and investment in order to understand the capital markets. One of the things that has become evident throughout my career path and having the ability to transition from architecture, construction, and real estate development is that many of the people that I sat in different meetings with and was working on different projects with typically had a career path where they stayed within architecture, they stayed within the construction industry, they stayed within development, and didn't have the ability to kind of see things from a holistic perspective from the different angles. There's a distinct advantage when you have the ability to collaborate and switch from one side of the industry to the other. When we were thinking through the curriculum for this, it was important to me that we looked at everything kind of from the bigger picture. So this industry and this specific organization has typically been focused on serving subcontractors, general contractors, consultants, the tech industry, and never really brought in the banks, the insurers, the asset managers. What I have seen in the industry is that when I see sustainability professionals, the sustainability professionals come from amazing backgrounds, whether it be focused in environmental biology, focused in architecture, focused in the sciences, work their way up to be the head of sustainability. And typically those individuals do not have a background in the capital markets. They do not have a background in finance. They do not have a background in risk, but ultimately we need to kind of move over and understand how that market works and how securities regulations have the ability to impact our industry. So as we go through the curriculum today, it was really our goal to have the ability to fill knowledge gaps and to kind of think through that people don't have the ability to switch sides from the subcontractor to the general contractor, the consultants, to the owner-operator side, to the developer side, to the bank, to the insurer, to the asset manager. A lot of the decisions in the net zero transition are being made at a higher level And those levels are net zero commitments that ultimately will end up trickling down through our entire industry and impacting all of our projects. While I was working at Amazon, Amazon is the 5th largest company in the world. It has over 1 million employees. And I was thinking through, how do you get the largest company in the world to move towards net zero? How do you get all of the building partners that they have to move to net zero? You focus on the Scope 1 emissions. The Scope 1 emissions are everything that they have the ability to control and they own. Their Scope 3 emissions is their business partners. It's everything upstream and downstream. Amazon may only do or provide 5% of the business services to a different company. However, that company needs to purchase zero-emission vehicles in order to be their partner. And they need to pencil that. It needs to make financial sense. And when they work to decarbonize their entire real estate portfolio, they need, for the consultants that they speak to, the developers they speak to, the general contractors, the subcontractors, to understand what net zero is. They need to have options. They can't just have one company that they can go to. They need to have hundreds of companies that they have the ability to go to. And those people need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And they need to be able to move quickly in order to respond. Amazon's not the only company that has signed on to net zero. When I started with the company and I understood that they had created the Climate Pledge in combination with the Worldwide Optimism Institute, the Climate Pledge is a pledge to get to net zero by 2040. When I was working for the company, there was over 230 signatories. Today, there's over 437 signatories of largest companies in the world that you can think of: Visa, Mercedes, UPS, DHL, Pepsi, JetBlue, Microsoft. The list goes on and on. I then kind of started to look at it and thought about it, and how are we going to do this? How do we move everyone towards a net zero transition when not everyone believes that climate change is real? I looked beyond what Amazon was doing, and I looked to the work of the UN. I looked to the Paris Agreement. I looked to the net zero signatories that were underneath that. I researched and I looked at Race to Zero. Race to Zero. Race to Zero is a combination of net zero asset managers, net zero banks, net zero insurers. There are over 315 asset managers that are a part of the Net Zero Alliance. They represent over $59 trillion. $59 trillion. And they have said, they have committed that their financed emissions will move to net zero. Companies that are included within that include Bentel Oak, Dream, Brookfield, Caisse de Dépôt, BlackRock, CalPERS, State Street, Invesco, Fidelity, Macquarie, Lazard, UPS. The list goes on. I then looked to the net zero banks. Net zero banks, there's BMO, CIBC, National Bank of Canada, RBC, TD, Coast Capital, Van City, Scotiabank, HSBC, B of A, Morgan Chase, Citibank, BNP Paribas. These are the largest banks in the world. Over 48% of the banking industry has committed to get to net zero. How do we not know this? How do the people in the building industry not know this? How are we sitting there in our jobs at architecture firms, subcontractors, general contractors, and we don't know that all these companies have signed on to net zero? How are we not staffing up for that? How are we not thinking about it every single day, right? When we were curating the content today, you'll see that we start off with the Canadian government, and it's, what is the Canadian government, that for the country that people live in here, what are they doing to respond to the Paris Agreement? You're going to hear from one of our leading banks, BMO, and they're going to talk about their net zero transition. They're going to talk about how they assess climate risk and why it is a concern to our economy. And what are the challenges associated with it? And they're going to speak through the different kinds of financial offerings that they have, that you're going to see from the different banks, that you may not be having discussions with them about, but they want to have discussions with you. And you'll also hear from professionals that are leading experts that are going to navigate and help you explain how architecture firms are solving this problem, how general contractors are solving this problem, how subcontractors are solving this problem. You're going to hear from the president of the United Nations Association Canada, and they're going to explain to you and help you frame the picture of how the UN SDGs plug into all of this. You're going to hear from one of the scientists from the IPC, International Panel on Climate Change, who is a contributing author, along with over 400 different scientists across the world who are spreading the message of how climate change is impacting our globe. And you'll have the ability to speak to a scientist who can help explain what seems to be so difficult for a lot of people to understand. There's so many different kinds of messages that we see from the media, and it's very confusing. The way that we have crafted this, we hope to provide clarity to the industry. The only way that we can work to solve this insurmountable challenge is to fill the knowledge gaps and to help everyone understand holistically what are we trying to do and how are we going to get there.